Uh, Good morning and welcome everyone to this workshop. Today I'm going to talk about poor disaster resilience and emergency management, ethical and economic costs of forgetting our past. So even before I talk about my subject, I would like to introduce myself once again. My name is Puru Casey, and I served in the police army for 25 years. And after my retirement, I moved to the United States. During my tenure as an army officer, I moved up to the rank of lieutenant colonel. And I commanded up to a battalion. And while in deputation in different countries, in Africa especially, I got a very, very outstanding opportunity to become a commander of the military observers, where I was given an area of responsibility which was the size of the France. And the problem that existed in that land, that stretch of land, was it varied from humanitarian assistance to fighting with the insurgents. So, and observation and reporting and timely execution of all the action was quite a challenge. However, I learned a lot in terms of how we should manage the crisis situation and how we bring about the balance between our ethical standards, our norms, and our understanding to fit into the understanding level of the people that we were going to serve. So, and in the home front, I kind of already told you that, especially in the when Nepal was under this very tight grip of insurgency from Maoists, the whole administration of the country was, it became like a demagnetized iron. So everything was going every which way. Nobody knew what to do. Nobody would know. Even at the government level, they wouldn't know how do we transport the basic necessities to the hills, because in every corner they expected some kind of disruption, whether it is either disaster, man-made or the natural, or there was deliberate efforts to destroy the supplies by attacking the convoys. There are so many other challenges, and whenever there was let me take you to a different level. When things go wrong, it really goes wrong. Even the lawyers and the judges in the court had to be protected. They were pressurized to give a kind of verdict that suited one particular kind of people. So in that kind of situation, assuring the government entities by providing them security was also a major challenge. So this is kind of a small introduction about me, which I think that yes, I have some experience. I can say that. With this, let me go back to my topic. So, in the background, I'm going to talk basically about 3-4 things here, which looks like it's a little bit a big subject, but sometime later in my research, I'm going to bring it down or squeeze it to maybe probably 1 or 2 core topics. Okay, so I'm going to talk about disaster and emergency management, right? And then why we have not learned from so many mistakes. So these are the kind of areas I'll be touching upon. Well, we all know, and just to reiterate this once again, disasters are situations of large-scale damage, injury, and death of natural, or it's a death of humans and other creatures that overwhelm the local resources and often necessitate external aid. Disaster raise many ethical dilemmas. Ethics aims to promote decisions that best support the well-being of people, communities, and the environment, and also reduce the risk of harm. Decisions must be made about who receives the limited resources, because in the time of disaster, we will definitely have limited resources, and sometimes with life and death consequences. Restrictions may be required to limit the spread of disease or maintain security, but may also interfere with people's right. That is where we need to strike the balance. Thus, while the action has contributed to developing the new field of disaster bioethics, much remains to be done to promote human rights and ethical action during disaster planning, responding, and research. With this background, let me go to the introduction. Dealing with the change or loss is an inevitable part of life. At some point, everyone experiences varying degree of setbacks. Some of the challenges might be relatively minor, while others are disastrous on a much larger scale. The scope of my topic is, as the scope of bioethics has become increasingly, it got wider day by day, and covering all aspects will be too large an area. The scope of my research will primarily focus on the natural disaster, namely floods and earthquakes, to make an analogical research of their effects on the developed and developing world. What I meant to say here is that I want to make analogical research. For example, if 7.1 Richter scale earthquake hits the third world country like Nepal, and if it hits a first world country like US, why we have so many different and varying results? Why so many death occurs there, and why only few death occurs here? That is just one part. There are so many other psychological aspect of natural disasters. There are so many others like financial, and how the resilience comes about in third world and in the first world. So these are the areas I'm going to talk about later on. So basically, what is resilience? For those who are new to the topic, resilience is nothing. If it is this like this, you throw it comes back to its seat. This is, in the simplest term, I can teach you what resilience is. You tend to come back to your normalcy. That is resilience. That equally applies in disaster situation. So, defining then as a community as part of the nation's sense of collective resilience is a very scientific endeavor, and the committee wanted to, there are so many committees, and they wanted to address the report toward the many kinds of communities that exist across the country. So, why I'm bringing up this topic is we always tend to forget. Okay, there was an earthquake, 10,000 people killed. There will be another earthquake, again 10,000 people killed. Despite all entities being in place. So where things go wrong, we'll be talking about that. So after we know this, after we know something about resilience, I'm going to talk a little bit about bioethics, because I'm jumping a little bit because everything is not possible to talk about at this time. So maybe Daryl, all the thing that I am talking, but for those who want to know a little bit, and my research or this topic is also focused to those who don't know, and to serve the interest of those who don't know about this realm of bioethics. So even before we understand bioethics, we got to know what is ethics, right? So ethics is a philosophical discipline pertaining to notion of good and bad, right or wrong, of our moral life in community. So what is the right thing to do and the good way to do, good to be? What is worthwhile? What are our obligations to one another? So these are the ethical questions that come to our mind. So this research paper will ask such mind-blowing questions and will fill the gaps that hamper the effective utilization of the resilience and the sustainability concepts within emergency planning. So, why we ask question? Why this asks question? What we need to know is they roll out very interesting question. And question could be anything like 100 years ago, people thought of going to, one person suddenly thought of going to moon. So he asked, hey, how about going to moon? So that kind of question generally is asked by bioethics. And only after that, the so-called scientists talk about making a vehicle to go to moon. So it's a bigger concept. It's not, simple questions that we throw on the floor. So let me also talk about some natural disaster. The natural disaster could occur due to an immediate extreme event for normal human life. Normal human life in its established social, traditional, and economic system to a considerable degree. It affects in a considerable degree. So United Nations define it as the occurrence of the sudden or more misfortune which disrupts the basic fabric and normal functioning of the society or a community. Today the term disaster is commonly used to denote the extreme event, be it natural or man-made. So we have a different kind of disaster. For example, wind, water-related natural disasters like flood, drought, cyclones, climate-related disasters, etc. The climate related disasters are like heat waves and cold, global warming, sea level rise, and there are other categories like volcanic eruptions. It has got a broad classifications, and and we also have natural disasters like earthquake, which is a certain global event below the surface of the earth, which results in generation of waves that travels far and wide, and that creates a widespread disruption and destruction too. And there will be landslides, snow avalanche, tsunami, and cyclone. And the other thing I would like to highlight is global warming. So, there has been a certain kind of I would say, deliberate propaganda going against this global warming thing. Because I'm kind of a witness to to what happens when global warming really goes bad. Because when I was in Nepal, I used to see the snow level on the mountain. So it would be like here, and after like 5-7 years, I myself saw the snow line going like kilometers up. So you have only this much snow on our mountains. So where all those snows vanished? It was a very, very serious question. The result being that now we had little water in the river, so aquatic life was gone. So people started had to go to a little faraway distance to fetch water, and marine life was not there. So people started slowly migrating to new place. So what happens if everybody starts congregating to one place? Let's say we kind of think about 100 years from now. So it's a very, very serious situation. So we got to be a little careful about this aspect too. So now, where the very core question is bioethics and disaster, how they come together. So, the underlying question is, where does that disaster gets intertwined with bioethics? The answer is not easy, but I deem it that it converges somewhere at resilience. The ability to bounce back at its normalcy at the fastest pace possible. So that is what I think. Otherwise, where would it converge? Disaster and the bioethics. So it has to come at one point where we're trying to give out that resilience to the community or the society or nation at large in a shortest possible time. Yeah, we might be able to do it in 5 years, but that will carry no value. So that is the point I'm trying, or my paper will try to make. So, my other areas that my research paper will touch is also ethical cost. So what is ethical cost? Let's take a real life situation here. Daryl just showed us a slide of the mushroom cloud of the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima on 6th of August 1945. The US dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima. So, were the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki ethical? Was that justified? So, it's a critical question again. So, what happened was about 90,000 to 166,000 people died in Hiroshima, and about 80,000 in Nagasaki. That led to the surrender of Japanese force in World War II. So, was it justified or not? In the one hand, we had bombing, in the other hand, surrender of the Japanese force. So, this is the area where we're talking, which is right. The idea can be divided into two groups. Those who believe that the bombing were morally justified, those who believe that the bombing were unethical. How do we know if a decision was ethically justifiable in history? So, the bombing can be viewed as both ethical and non-ethical. It is difficult to say which view is right, as ethical decision can be made in a number of ways. Because a country will say something which other country opposes. As we know that somebody's freedom fighter is somebody's terrorist. So a terrorist could be just a talk given by the adversary, whereas he would be fighting for the liberation of his race or nation, or you name it. So using different ways of knowing, like reason, emotion, language, and perception, the ethical decision can be made. It can also be made by following ethical schools of thought, including utilitarianism, which says the greatest good for the greatest number of people. If greatest number of people are benefiting from out of any kind of decision, probably it's right. But we never know which is completely right or not. Well, the other schools of thought says, okay, deontological ethics. So that says what one ought to do, one what must do. The other says teleological ethics, and it examines the means and end result. The end, which says the end justifies the mean. No matter how you do, if you do the thing on time, in the way it was expected, that's okay. So these are the school of thoughts by help of which we can arrive at a decision. So economical, just like ethical cost, the economical cost has also great bearing on disaster and thereafter. Since modern disaster, natural or human-made, occur more frequently, causing more death, affecting more people, and increasing economic loss. So, just to give an account of what happened in some of the major disasters, just like Japan's earthquake, tsunami, that cost world 360 billion. Hurricane Katrina cost 250 billion. And the list goes on and on. So, Mississippi River flood here in the US cost 2 billion. The interesting data I have here is actually Nepal, in the recent earthquake, Nepal lost 10 million. So it's not a big data as compared to 360 billion, but why it's so important is the GDP of Nepal is only 19.2 billion, so we lost 10 billion. So 50% of the GDP is lost in one single earthquake. That's pretty serious. So disaster is disproportionate, or it has to be taken in different light when it happens to developing countries versus to the developed countries. So there are, I've got a lot of data. I'm sorry, I couldn't show you the PowerPoint slides. So now the central concern of this paper are why this is so and why we can and how we can improve. So with the research, this paper will target some serious research questions like: is it true that lessons recur? What lessons are persistently identified? How do we tend to forget? Kind of telling us that why don't we take lessons from the past and try to implement more effectively, and how effectively the bioethicists could play to help save ethical and economic costs. So to conclude, as we cannot say if something is definitely right or wrong, we must rely on the process of decision making based upon ethical school of thought such as utilitarianism. The fact that challenges to learning lessons persist despite regular experience with them is a serious concern. In today's environment, where the emergency response missions space is expanding dramatically to include broader homeland security responsibilities, the ability to capitalize on experience and improve capacity is ever more important. But organizations cannot just be told to change. Enduring change needs to address the structure, system, and culture of an organization so that this pattern can be altered. And the property and life in particular, which is so valuable, is saved, maybe without little effort. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So please stay here. We have a lot of questions to discuss with you. So, do you think how much of the work of the Army is now involved in disaster resilience in Nepal? I mean, is it like 20%, or we imagine the time of the earthquake where it was more, but in their regular annual activities, is it a major part?
Yeah, I think if I understood your question correctly, what happens is, in any country, army is the first responder to disaster. So, and army is probably one of the few organizations who are, I wouldn't say fully, but capable enough to take and respond to the disaster in the fastest possible time, because they are trained for that, they are ready for that, they have a command structure for that, and they have technical know-how that, and they are experienced to handle such situation. So Army is primarily involved right from the planning to the execution, and also after the disaster when there is a recovery efforts. So it's from right from the beginning to the very end, even though right after the kind of stabilization, the civil entities come into play, and they take up their own responsibility to bring the society back to the normalcy. Yes, they are pretty much involved. I would say at first it's like 90%, and then they kind of scale down their activities when the situation is kind of stabilized. And that equally applicable in all parts of the world, I guess. Even in the developed countries, that's the same thing. Once the situation is stabilized, the civil entities, other humanitarian entities or organizations take control of the situation. Because Army is not the expert on everything. So, for example, in healthcare, Army cannot have their say in everything. So we have to bring in the health expert, which Army is not. So that is the example. That is only one example. It applies in every other aspect of the society.
Okay. Thank you.
So any other questions?
Other questions or comments? What about,
Okay.
Carol?
With a little bit of luck, I'll stand up.
Okay, good. You're going to have a dialogue.
And if I don't, then I'll have to speak in the sitting position. Yay. Okay. Now, see, I look at this from a slightly different perspective, not from the outside looking in, but from the inside looking out. And if you think about it, catastrophes, crises, disasters, emergencies, they're part of life. They've been around longer than you and I have. They've been around for millions of years, really. I mean, think about this for a minute. What about our early ancestors from tens of thousands of years ago? The first ones that migrated away from Mesopotamia, maybe headed north on a nice bright sunny day in the summer. And it was a nice day, and they went a little bit farther, and a little bit farther, and a little bit farther. And then one morning they woke up in their cave and decided to go out and wash their face, have a drink of water. The water was frozen. The ground was covered with some white stuff that later got described as snow. Okay, no plants were growing. The animals that all were smart enough to go and hibernate. If you can't gather food, you can't go hunting, you can't go gathering, what are you going to eat? And that taught our very, very early ancestors about little things about survival, like putting stuff away when it's nice so you have something when it isn't. Okay? So I look at this as part of survival is an individual responsibility. Okay, we have, I mean, if you want to blame the government, you want to blame the army, you want to blame the first responders for anything, first you have to live, you have to be alive. Okay, your corpse isn't going to say a word. We found that out every time we do an autopsy. We know they do not speak. Okay, so where do you start? Well, you know, I live in Southern California, and California has two seasons, fires and earthquake. And we never know, we're pretty sure fires are going to come all the time, and earthquakes surprise us every now and then. So every home is encouraged, almost forced to have a survival kit. What do you need? Well, we need 3 things to survive as living things. And what are those 3 things? We need air, we need water, we need food, in that order. Okay? So hopefully you are in a position where the air will not be contaminated unless you're in a fire zone, but that's something else again. We are encouraged to have enough water, like I think it's a gallon a day per person for several days, because you have to figure in some really big emergency, you are going to be alone. You're going to be on your own. You, your spouse, your children, you need to have water around, you need to have food around, you need to have batteries and, you know, some means, some of the disaster radio frequencies will still be broadcasting, you can still get out. You need to have blankets, you need to have medicine. Okay? What if one of your children is a diabetic? You better have insulin, because they're not going to survive long without it. My little brother was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 8 years old. And I know more about controlling diabetes and looking for the symptoms of, you know, too much, you know, too high or too low blood sugar than you could possibly imagine. I mean, I'm an unofficial consultant to half the diabetics in Southern California. Okay, and then, so there you are in your home. Where do you look next? The next place you look, we talk about community. I talk about your neighborhood. I mean, we have ethnic communities, we have social communities, but they're not always geographically located, okay? But you do have somebody living on either side of you, someone living in front of you, someone behind you, maybe above and below. These are the people you're going to have to rely on, and they're going to rely on you to help one another during this immediate times of crisis. Okay, and then you go outward from the circle. It starts with the family, the home, and the nucleus, and you move out to the neighbors, and then the community, and then to the state, and then, okay. And if you think about it, okay, as human beings, we do know how to come together in terms of crisis, at times of crisis. Let's think back about, what, 6-7 weeks, a soccer team and their coach in the caves in Thailand. The entire world sent somebody to help. You know, the soccer team and their coach were fortunate. They were in a place where they had sufficient air, and that continued until responders came in, and then they had to bring oxygen in because the responders were using up all the oxygen and the team couldn't get it. So we created our own disaster in that. They also had access to fresh water. Another thing they had was emotional stability. Okay, they had a coach who was willing to talk with them, to work with them, and that's something that's also very important in times of crisis. You can't have somebody running around screaming about, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. Yep, sooner or later you are. Just don't plan to do it in the next 5 minutes. We don't have time to cope with that. Okay, and so much of crisis management, catastrophe management, disaster, emergency is keeping your head in the right place and keeping track of what you have, what you need, so that if the government fails, if public health fails, if the emergency responders fail, you've got something that you can go back and say, look, you could have done this better. The other thing I would say is, as much as possible, try to plan for what you're going to do, but do not have what I call a knee-jerk response. Okay. Here in the United States, in the aftermath of the terrorist attack, 9/11, okay, with, you know, the airplanes, the Twin Towers, the Pentagon, they were going to hit the White House, that landed in Pennsylvania. There was this big response like, we got to do something about this. People knew little bits and pieces. We got to put all this response, all this intelligence together under one umbrella, and we did. We called it the Department of Homeland Security. We also put FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Administration, under the Department of Homeland Security. Now, FEMA was orchestrated, was designed to be like a rapid deployment force. They knew what needed to be done. They could get out to the places that needed disasters. They were not accustomed to the bureaucracy that goes with the cabinet department. What happened next? Katrina. That's why so many, it cost so many billions and so many lives were lost, because we couldn't respond in a hurry. So keep in mind that the things that need to be done in a hurry should be kept outside of the big administration. You know, this is all what I would call social justice at its very being. This is what it means to be a human being, to take care of yourself, to help others. And that's what I would call the, that would be my comments about disaster preparedness. I also talk fast, sorry about that. Thank you. Okay.
What's the response? Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I'm with you. I fully agree to your points.
Yeah, I mean, so,
Individual empowerment at the household level.
Right.
Yeah, actually,
okay, thank you.
Comments? So what's the fundamental ethical principles involved? So saving life is
Right,
one.
yeah,
And are there times when we have to do away with respective autonomy? Because let's say if the matter of saving life is the most paramount, what about triage, for example? Sometimes you have to save the ones that can maximize the number of people you can save.
right. Well, one of the things, when I was reading about the origins of triage and, you know, during the war, for example, World War II, when they were triaging soldiers, at that time antibiotics and sulfur were available, not worldwide, but they were available. And you know who got not the soldiers who were the most grievously wounded, the ones who had social diseases, venereal diseases, because they could be cured and sent back out to fight immediately. And anybody who's been in an emergency room knows what triage is all about. If you are having a heart attack or a stroke, just sit down and they'll take a number and get in line. They'll get to you sooner or later.
Yeah, it's a kind of a dilemma that we come at, you know, in a
Yeah.
situation like that. There's a bleeding soldier, and then there's another soldier with venom disease, and then we have one pill. So who do we give it to? I mean, one pill is just an example case. I mean, the resource is very limited. That's what I'm going to say, right? You want to cure that person and send him to the war again, or give it to this guy? So, I mean, this is a question for you too. What would you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole all ethical.
Yeah, I mean,
what would you do? And
What would you do?
under given
People will
circumstances?
come to the same decision-making challenge. So,
Andrew in Canada has a comment. The humans that live today exist because we evolved to breathe okay next to fire. Nature has inbuilt mechanisms to achieve those primary needs. So is there an individual responsibility to adapt to different circumstances?
Right.
So,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. It's. I mean, if you go by the Darwin's definition of what it's a transformation, a human transformation. It's the first survival of the fittest, right? So, yeah, I mean, one has to adapt himself to, or change, or transfer himself to make himself able to withstand any change in the atmosphere or elsewhere.
Because without change, you're not alive.
You're not alive. And change is the process. Even if you are not willing to do it, you are towards that direction. You are changing, right? So it's the one who will survive who changes fastest, right? Yeah. It's I was discussing with one of my friends, This is a changing in human life is a very, very serious topic. How far we go to change ourselves? That's again a question.
Yeah, to change ourselves, but also the fact we are changing whether we want to or not.
Okay, the case in point is you gotta, if you don't know how to swim, and
Stay away from the water.
One is you don't stay with the water, but there is you got to go across the channel. What do? You don't know swimming, right? So if you want to change yourself, okay, I mean it's a classic example I'm really about. If if there was a answer or a solution where there was let's say a vaccine or something like that would keep you afloat on water, would you do that?
No, that's because I don't like water, but that's
No,
the
that's
problem.
individual, you don't like. But I mean, as a human society, if we had a vaccine that no amount of fire would affect us, would you want to vaccinate yourself?
Yes, sure.
Huh?
Why not?
Yes.
So today you want to be safe from some fire, right? Tomorrow you want to be like a duck who doesn't drown. If you want to be vaccinated, and so one after another, after 20 shots, you will be no longer a human. Would you want to be that? You lose all the characters of human being.
Well, now also we have been getting vaccination for many diseases which don't even exist in some places of the world.
Professor, what do you think? You get 20 vaccines and then you are capable of withstanding any kind of
That's the
disaster.
end of it.
Sorry?
That's the end of it.
End of it. So this is the ethical question that will be directed towards by physicists like us one day. I'm going too far, but this question will be put to us. Okay, what are you doing?
Well, right now, there's a big fight going on here in the Los Angeles Unified School District
Right.
about whether
You're-
children can be,
I mean,
can
this
go to
question
school
will
if
be
they
asked.
have not had their
Okay,
vaccination.
sorry.
And there are some parents that do not want their children to be vaccinated, and their only recourse at this time is homeschooling. The LA Unified School District will not allow an unvaccinated child into the classroom. And they've got big clinics set up outside of every school in the district, so that if the kid hasn't been vaccinated, they grab them. We're supposed to take them in and vaccinate them, but, now you're impinging on the parents' autonomy, their decision, their idea to make decisions about their children. So,
We want to change, we want to survive, but only to the extent and not at the cost of our own humanity
right.
or characters that makes us human. That's it. That is the answer I think. But I mean, there's not a right or wrong answer. That's just how I think.
Well, I look at it as over the years, the generations, the millennia, we have acquired so much knowledge. We know so many things and we have so little wisdom. We have no idea how to deal with all that knowledge. How to put it to use for the betterment of humanity. So,
What do you think?
Madam is right to a great extent. Your conversation is right.
yeah, right.
You have exhibited the important criteria for living
Yeah. So,
and the relevance of bioethics for today's living.
okay. You understand I don't hear very well.
Pardon?
That's my excuse, okay?
Pardon?
So if I sit with my left hand ear turned towards you, forget it, I have tuned out completely. So, and what I usually say is I don't hear with my left ear and I don't listen with my right, so it pretty much cuts me out of the conversation.
Other comments? Reflections? So, who decides Andrew's asking, who decides then what's the strategy for the individual and how to balance this against the group? and do we have a diversity? I also would ask about responsibility. Let's say somebody chooses to live in a very disaster-prone place.
Yeah.
What's our responsibility for that? Or let's say they decide to climb a mountain in the middle of a snowstorm. Do we need to go and rescue them?
Well, I would say no, we don't need to, but I'd say also that we probably will. To some extent, we will do what we can because it's another human being there. And as far as the, people are determined to live in disaster-prone areas. We face that every time we have major rainstorms in California and we have mudslides and everything falls down into towards the ocean. And then the question is, should the insurance company pay these people to rebuild if they're going to rebuild in the same area and they're going to fall down the next time we have them? And so the insurance companies say, yeah, we'll pay them to rebuild and we'll jack their rates up so high they won't be able to afford to live there anymore. That's an economic response that might not be to our liking, but it's kind of the way it is in the United States at this time.
What about in Nepal? Does the army have to rescue people who are crazy? Like all the mountaineers on Mount Everest?
Yes. I mean, personally, I think that the government has the obligation, not only responsibility, to save people, the lives of the people. Otherwise, why they are government? We have government because there are bad people and there are good people, right? Good people, fine, they're going to find the society, but bad people who can create harm or bring about insecurity to the society, then the government has the obligation, responsibility to tame them or check them or get hold of them and then put them right and then fix the problem. Yes, otherwise, at times, one bad guy will be enough to bring about a large, big scale devastation. Just like what happened in California, right? One guy set up place in the jungle, and then now we have like acres and acres of fire going on. So if an army is just a small entity of the government. If the army has a chance to do that, why not? Taking out of that place. Otherwise, you are not doing it. I mean, you are fulfilling your responsibilities. And every individual is also police. Every citizen is also police, not in uniform. So we have also obligation and responsibility to check or curtail people or our obligation is to be directed to take such people out of our society and then educate them and then again send them back to the society. That's what I feel.
Just a comment, how would you react to something between acting ethically as well as foolishly? For example, if a person chooses to go into a hazard, let's just take an example of Pakistan. We have like certain adventurous people who despite warnings, like to go in the water, into the depth. And they won't listen, and there's a person right next to them, even though he knows that he doesn't know how to swim and he can't save them, and then this person is drowning. The question comes between, should I act ethically to save him or should I act foolishly? So he jumps in and they both end up drowning. What do you decide? How do you go in that type of situation? Should you go for him or should you not? Because you know that I can't do this either, but multiple people have drowned.
The situation was a person who didn't know how to swim.
Exactly.
Just jumped into the
save the other person,
right? And the other person jumped to save him, right?
Yeah.
The other person knows how to swim. The person who's going to save that person
No, the person who jumped in, he lost his footing, let's say, and he was drowning. The person who jumped to save him, he doesn't know how to swim, but he's like family relative or something, so he wants to pull him out ethically.
Okay.
Yeah, because these conditions happen in Pakistan and loads of people have drowned like that. Families have drowned. So what should you do in that split decision or?
No, I think, I mean, if you just don't know how to swim, then how you make that foolish decision of going into the
It's
water?
just that spark of the moment decision.
Yeah.
You don't think, you just become.
It's a gut reaction.
That's a gut reaction to jump. I mean, that's absolutely individual, his individual decision, which I would say misdecision he made. That's not a decision,
Instead
right?
he can shout.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many other ways to get help. Not that necessarily he has to jump into the water to save someone, right? And then also we have to. There's a one very strong adage proverb in Nepali. I want to share this with you because if you see a big buffalo falling down the hill, you can. If it's absolutely falling down the hill, you cannot give your shoulder to stop the big buffalo.
Obviously.
It will obviously take you down, right?
Exactly.
So you just say, okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. That's the justify. And you see the size of the buffalo, and you cannot give your shoulder there. So this buffalo, right? So this is what it is. Simple. I mean, if you can, if it is within your capacity, ability to do something, do it. If not, get help from some others to help improve the situation. If not, at that particular context and time, it's just not the right.
So, Andrew also asks, how sustainable is the Army model? So, do we need to act without being ordered? That seems to be very responsible citizenship. Does it work? And how can we, maybe it's part of a bioethics education that we can give to people to act in the common interest to save people.
I think probably it's most of the common interest if you do what you are capable of doing without endangering anybody else. Okay, that's why, in spite of the fact that it's a gut reaction, it probably wasn't a good idea for the non-swimmer to jump in after the one who got caught in the water. Sometimes you have to know what your own limits are. I had an example in my own family where one of my 2-year-old cousins managed to get through all of the fences and fell into the pool. And his grandmother, who can't swim any better than I can, no idea what to do, but she just stood there and she screamed like a bloody fool. And then she told me later, she said, I couldn't do anything. I said, yes, you could. You did what you needed to do. You screamed so loud that your neighbor who can swim came to get Brooks out of the water, and the neighbor on the other side called 911. You do what is within your purview. You do what is best for the person who needs help. So I don't know, do you need to be ordered? I hope not. I hope that some of us have enough sense at least to act when we can. I may not be that person, but that's because I'm getting old, so I have different priorities.
So, for your PhD thesis, how will you apply these questions? Do you think it's going to be what sort of cases are easy to see this model, and are there challenges? Do you think in the last, over time, the acceptance of disaster resilience as a central duty in the Army is increased, or it's always been there?
I think the challenges are going up and down because if you see with global warming, overpopulation, and other factors, disasters are on the rise. So if it is on the rise, the challenges to Army is also, it's getting more and broader day by day. It's not less, never less. So yeah, what Army should expect, regardless of any country, they should expect more more disaster, man-made or natural, and be prepared for that in the future. Because, I mean, the reason is that they have the means and ability to respond in the quickest possible time. And that too, it'll be an organized effort. I agree with that one.
Right.
But as my advisor said when I was in the bioethics doctoral program, he says, if it were easy, it wouldn't be ethics.
Right. And if you, I mean, thing is, I mean, there's a saying that you are very right. I mean, if it was a cut and dry answer to every problem, we would not be doing this. We wouldn't have to do this research.
All of the bioethicists would have nothing to talk about.
Yes. So, and then what happens is, I mean, if you expect enemy to come from one of these four directions, north, south, and the enemy comes from the top, right? With the direction that you never get
It comes from underneath.
Yeah, it comes from underneath. And then if you cover that too, then it comes from southwest, northwest. So there are so many other directions, and then they come from I mean, what we should know in relation to disaster is drill. This is one saying too. It's between bioethicists and God trying to steal the calendar. When and how. And the God is God, those people who believe in God, or those people who don't believe in God, say it. For them, it's superpower. For those who believe in God, let's say. Okay? It's a matter of stealing the character. Okay, Katrina, when it will come? God is not going to reveal that. As bioethicists, as scientists, we want to have that calendar, steal that from God. Still, God is not telling us the strength of the devastation that thing will strength of devastation that will lead or have that effect on us. So we're trying to, constantly know exactly, give me the exact time. Okay, there's a typhoon, type 4, type 8 coming on this side from this direction. Yes, but despite all that, again we'll have destruction of life and property. So it's quite a struggle. It's going on, and total victory by human is not in horizon now. Maybe in the future, I don't know. But even if in the future, I don't know, but the strength will be never able to ascertain the kind of impact that will leave on human property.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Excellent.
Thank you all for your patience.
Yes.